This has been an especially tense time for Wyoming's gas, oil, and coal sectors, and for the state and local agencies depending on the tax revenues these industries provide. Governor Mead has had to revise the state's energy strategy in the wake of falling prices, and he's responded to the massive layoffs in the coal industry recently. The governor discusses these and other issues with Wyoming Signature's Pat Wolfenbarger.
Governor Mead, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Pat.
This has been a busy time for you after the end of the Wyoming legislature with some announcements concerning the energy industry, especially the layoffs in the coal sector. When you look at what's happening right now, how is the state prepared to deal with these issues going forward?
Well, in some ways I think we're well prepared, but I will tell you there's certainly some disappointments coming out of the session from my perspective where we could have been better situated to deal with the situation. On the good side, in my first 4 years of office, we nearly doubled the size of the rainy day fund. We increased the permanent fund by about 60%, which was very appropriate. When you get most of your revenue from minerals, you should build up those types of funds because you have days like we're in now where your coal prices are suppressed and oil and gas is suppressed. And so in that, as I said in my State of the State, at that time we had the largest rainy day fund relative to our budget, third largest overall in terms of dollars. And that certainly, if used appropriately, allows us to get through as a state through these hard times. What it doesn't do is provide immediate relief from individuals and families who are suffering from just getting a notice you've lost your job. You've been at your job 10, 15, 20 years and you're out of a job. For those people, the size of our rainy day fund means very little, understandably. For those people, the economic condition of the state can be whatever, but if they don't have a job, it's problematic. We're still about 5% unemployment, which is lower than the national average, but for those individuals, it could be 40% or 1%. It doesn't make any difference if they've lost their job. And so it's not just coal, it's oil and gas, and we see the tremendous effects on that to the direct individual. And then we see the ripple effect across all industry sectors. And so it's hard to prepare for that sort of downturn. But one of the ways that I thought we could have done a better job coming out of the session was we got to continue to diversify our economy. And I asked for money for a cybersecurity program, for example, at the University of Wyoming. I asked for money for a STEM education project to send every high school kid, the team that wanted to have an opportunity to a robotics first competition, a national competition. And I asked for access to large dollar amounts for economic development, and that was denied. And those things will help long term. Again, they don't help that person who on a Friday just found out they lost their job.
Is there any concern in the near future about continuation of layoffs in the energy sector and in the other sectors of Wyoming economy?
I am concerned, and it's a good question. I hate to say this, but I think that things are going to get worse before they get better. I think we're going to see more layoffs, both in coal, oil, and gas. I think that we're going to feel that pain. I think there will be a contraction in the industry, particularly in oil and gas, that at some point will help the market. But for us as a state and for those individuals, I'm afraid there's going to be more bad news coming. We're facing, as with coal, we're facing the regulatory environment, but then we're also facing, stiff competition from natural gas. And we're facing, some relatively warm winters, and we're seeing stockpiles of coal at all-time or near all-time record levels. And until those things have taken care of by the market, I think we're going to see some more layoffs. I went up the other day to Campbell County, and in my life I have never seen so many engines stacked up. It looked like just a regular train, one after another, and I lost count of how many were just sitting there. And that's not just coal, that's those people who feed the coal miners, and it's the people in the railroad business and all the people that they support. And you just can't have that, and you can't have the oil and gas prices we have without, unfortunately, seeing some more layoffs.
You know, in the past, Wyoming's gone through the boom and bust cycles, and every time it's been a little bit different situation going in. It's been a different situation coming out of it. When you look at what the future may be for Wyoming coming out of this, to what extent do you see it changing? You talked about trying to change, economic diversity, technology as being areas to look at. What can be done now in planning for the future?
Well, I think it's, as we come out of this, I'm an impatient person on some of these things, but I want technology to be our fourth largest sector because I think that is the appropriate fit. And when you see some of the software companies we have, we see some of the hardware, for example, Microsoft coming. When you see manufacturing, Magpool, which has exceeded all expectations, I think that is what we have to continue to press on in the future. But it takes time to do it, and it takes vision, and frankly, it takes some dollars to do that. And we've got to invest in that, not only to defend ourselves against the economic up and downs, but frankly, it's the best way to keep our most important resources, our young people, to give them as many choices to say yes to Wyoming as possible if they otherwise are trying to choose Wyoming. They don't, if I don't want to be in ranching, I don't want to be a coal miner, I don't want to be a banker, and that overly simplifies it, but I want to be in the tech sector. I want to develop software. I want to do coding. I want to be in the hardware business. I want to be in a medical environment where we're using high-tech telemedicine. We want to give those kids as many chances to say yes to Wyoming, and having those opportunities, I think, helps provide that, as well as diversity against the economic ups and downs that we see when we're so heavily into minerals. Having said that, it's not that you don't want to displace minerals, you want to add to it. It's a supplemental.
When you look at your recent update of your energy strategy that you released last month, talk about alternative energy resources. What kind of potential do you see along those lines? Some of that is in the technology area that you talk about. Some of it has to do with regulatory guidelines that are on the federal level, not necessarily on the state level, that may be impeding the growth of that sector.
Yeah, I think it's within the energy industry. It's still sort of a nascent part of it. It's sort of new. It's small, renewable energy, and I think what we have to do is, it's not enough to build the wind farm, for example, and put up the transmission and ship the electrons to California. That is sort of akin to dig and ship, right? We want to have where is the science and the scientists who are developing the new wind turbine, the pitch of the prop. Where are the people who are going to maintain those? And LCCC, for example, here in Cheyenne, begin their work on a program on training those people who would maintain those. And I think we have to think that way, is if we're going to build the largest wind farm in the country, which I think we're going to do in Carbon County, we need to do more than just put them up and ship the electrons. We should be involved in, how can we get more involved in the manufacturing of it and the maintenance of it and the science of it. And I think that's a good opportunity, not only with renewables, but frankly, where we ought to be thinking about at the University of Wyoming is, it's not just the science of how you crack that rock, but rather than, say, Company A trying to develop the expertise on a solution for a particular play, they come to the University of Wyoming, and we develop that expertise in an incredible way that provides services that, particularly during downturns in oil prices, maybe I'm just throwing out an example, maybe Halliburton doesn't want to have that in-house expertise, and we can provide it for Halliburton, for Baker Hughes, for Schlumberger, for whomever it may be, and I think that's certainly the opportunity we see at the University of Wyoming.
So looking at your educational resources that you have in the state, in the community colleges at the university, as a resource for providing the expertise needed to move forward, you see an opportunity then with kind of repurposing then the industries that are in the state that we relied on to to go into those areas? Are there other uses for coal or
Right.
things like that?
I think so. I mean, we put a lot of money in the University of Wyoming, but I'm very excited about the university now with the engineering and the science initiative and just exactly what you described. We've always thought of coal as how do you burn it, how do you get a heat source or electricity out of it. But now the University of Wyoming is looking at coal as it is made up of different chemical compounds. Let's break those down and what can we use, what feedstock do they provide for other materials? And you know, if somebody said today, half of our coal is going to be used for electricity, but the other half we need to build products, that would be very exciting for the coal industry right now and very exciting for the state. And I think that's a direction the university is headed. And it provides excitement, along with what we're doing at the Integrated Test Center in Campbell County, where, you know, capturing that slipstream, I'm telling you, it's a game changer if you could get to the point where that is not viewed as a liability, but it's viewed as an asset, that people want it to produce graphene or whatever it may be. That's a game changer, not only in terms of environment and those people, as we're concerned about climate change, but it's a game changer in terms of using the whole product in every way possible.
You know, connected with, of course, the development aspects of the resources in Wyoming is preservation of those resources for other purposes, recreation, of course, being a major one, but agriculture. Public lands are in the discussion for should the states take more control over them, exactly what the purpose. You just recently we're part of a partnership with the Secretary of the Interior to develop a sage-grouse plan. Mm-hmm. Now that's kind of being attacked by both sides of it. But when you look at the future public lands policy, how is Wyoming going to be involved in these discussions?
You know, I think it's, there was a point in the past, and maybe not too distant past, where I think if you asked everybody in Wyoming, you know, what you think about public lands, whether we ought to keep them or to get rid of them, there may have been a lot of different views, but I think public lands, open space, have become such a part of our culture and our history and our future in Wyoming. We want responsible multiple use development of public lands, but you can't even meet the most hardcore sort of industry folk who don't appreciate having open space and recreation, the wildlife, the beauty, and what it does to the environment. And so we see, you know, the legal movements to say, hey, we're going to take over all the federal land in different states, and some certainly believe that in Wyoming as well. My view is that we're basing that philosophy on an assumption that if the state had it, everything's going to be better. And a couple things I'd point out on that is, you know, in 2012 we had massive wildfire season. The state spent roughly $45 million fighting those fires. Had we owned all the federal land, we would have spent in excess of $90 million. And so that's just an example. And so what I have proposed and talked to the Secretary of Interior about and others is, listen, this doesn't have to be a hostile situation. If we believe that as a state that we can do a better job managing some of these federal lands, let's form a pilot project where the feds say, okay, here's all the baseline on this parcel of federal ground. The baseline in terms of water, land, soil, wildlife, everything. State, you're going to manage it, you're going to pay for the management, and we're going to see where you are in 10 years, or we're going to see where you are in 20 years. And if you can prove that the wildlife's better, the environment's better, the soil's better, the water's better, all of those things are better, and you've paid for it at a time when we, the feds, are fiscally constrained, you know, let's look at pilot projects in there and do it on a voluntary basis versus, you know, the idea that you take it over and the concern that some have, you're going to take over that federal land and you're going to start selling it away. You know, Wyoming likes open spaces. I like open spaces, and it certainly is conducive to promoting our second largest industry, which is tourism.
Well, thank you very much, Governor, for talking to us today.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you being here today.